My name is Ethan Whitaker, and until 3 months ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was. I was 36 years old running a furniture restoration shop in Albuquerque, the kind of place where the smell of wood stain and linseed oil had seeped so deep into the walls that it greeted you before you even opened the door. I thought I knew my story. The disappointing eldest son of Malcolm Whitaker, a real estate mogul worth $200 million who built his empire from nothing and expected his children to be titans of industry. Instead, he got me a man who chose sawdust under his fingernails over stock portfolios, who found more joy in bringing a broken Victorian armchair back to life than in any boardroom deal. But everything I thought I knew shattered the night Malcolm slapped me across the face at his 72nd birthday party in front of 180 guests. The crack of his palm against my cheek echoed through his Taos Estate's grand ballroom like a judge's gavel delivering a life sentence. "You're a disgrace to the family name," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of that massive room with its vaulted ceilings and crystal chandeliers. "I'm removing you from the will. Every penny of the $200 million goes to Grant and Vanessa. You get nothing." The phones came out immediately. My cousin Tyler was live streaming before Malcolm's hand even left my face. My other relatives, business associates, even the catering staff, they all had their cameras trained on me like I was some exotic animal in a zoo experiencing a breakdown for their entertainment. The videos were online within minutes. Billionaire disinherit son at birthday party became the top trending topic that night. My humiliation was packaged, shared, and consumed by millions of strangers who would never know what led to that moment. Malcolm Whitaker stands 6'1" with silver hair that he keeps perfectly styled even at 72. That night he wore a custom Italian suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. He has these cold gray eyes that can calculate the value of anything in seconds except apparently his oldest son. He built his real estate empire by being ruthless, by seeing opportunities where others saw obstacles, and by never ever showing weakness. To him, I wasn't just weak. I was proof that even Malcolm Whitaker could fail at something. Diane Whitaker, the woman I called mother for 35 years, stood beside him in a black evening gown that made her look like royalty. At 69, she maintained herself with the dedication of someone who understood that appearance was currency in their social circle. Her blonde hair, professionally colored every 4 weeks, was swept into an elegant chignon. She had this way of smiling that never quite reached her eyes, especially when she looked at me. That night, as Malcolm's hand connected with my face, I saw something flicker across her expression. Was it guilt, fear, or just disappointment that her husband was making a scene? The truth about that night, about everything that led to it and everything that came after, starts with understanding that families keep secrets. Some secrets are small, like the affair Malcolm had 12 years ago that Diane pretended not to know about. Some are medium-sized, like my brother Grant's gambling problem that mysteriously disappeared after a large sum vanished from one of Malcolm's development funds. But some secrets are so massive, so fundamental, that they reshape reality itself. My secret, the one I didn't even know existed, was that Ethan Whitaker was never real. I was Jacob Carlisle, stolen from a park in Seattle when I was 7 months old, raised by people who knew they were living a lie every single day for 35 years. Every birthday cake, every Christmas morning, every family photo was built on the foundation of a kidnapping that destroyed my biological parents' lives while creating the fiction of mine. The morning after Malcolm's party, 3 lawyers knocked on my apartment door. Sandra Whitman. Peter Donovan and Eric Cho didn't look like angels of revelation, but that's exactly what they were. "We represent your biological father," Sandra said, her voice gentle but certain. "Victor Carlisle has been searching for his kidnapped son for 35 years. Eric opened a briefcase and pulled out a file that contained my real life, the one that was stolen from me before I could even form memories. when I saw the photograph of my biological parents holding me as a baby, when I recognized the silver bracelet with the train engine that still circled my wrist, when I understood that everything I believed about myself was built on someone else's crime, I fell to my knees in my small apartment above the workshop, surrounded by the only honest things in my life. The furniture I'd restored with my own hands, even if I'd never known whose hands they really were. I'd always been the black sheep of the Whitaker family, though I never understood why it hurt Malcolm so much that I chose differently than he expected. While my younger brother Grant managed hedge funds on Wall Street, turning millions into more millions with a few keyboard clicks, I spent my days bent over a workbench coaxing life back into wood that others had given up for dead. My sister Vanessa ran her own law firm by 31 with 45 employees and clients that included half of New Mexico's political elite. She had a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Albuquerque, and I had a workshop that used to be a tire shop where the afternoon light filtered through dust motes like golden snow. The workshop was my sanctuary. Every morning I'd arrive at 6 years before the rest of the world demanded anything from me, and I'd stand among the pieces waiting for restoration. Victorian chairs with broken spindles, Art Deco tables with water damage, grandmother clocks that hadn't ticked in decades. Each piece had a story, a history of being loved before it was broken. My clients trusted me with their heirlooms, their memories, and I took that responsibility seriously. Mrs. Lillian Mercer was my favorite client, though she'd become much more than that over the years. At 78, she had this regal bearing that made you stand straighter in her presence. She'd bring me pieces from her estate sales, always wrapped carefully in old quilts, always with a story attached. This belonged to a railroad executive's widow, she'd say, running her weathered hands over a damaged S-car. She wrote love letters at this desk for 50 years. Can you imagine all that love soaked into the wood grain? She had this way of looking at me sometimes, studying my face like she was reading a book in a language she only half remembered. "You have gentle hands, Ethan," she told me once while I was showing her the progress on a Japanese tea table. "That's a gift from somewhere deep inside. Some things can't be taught or bought. They just are." My relationship with Malcolm had been strained since I was 18 and announced I wasn't going to study business at Harvard like he'd planned. Instead, I went to the Atlantic School of Design, studying furniture design and restoration. Malcolm paid for it, but he made sure I knew it was under protest. "You're wasting your potential," he'd say during every holiday dinner, every birthday gathering, every time my work came up in conversation. "Any idiot with sandpaper can refinish furniture." My mother Diane played the peacekeeper, though her peacekeeping always seemed to involve trying to change my mind, rather than changing Malcolm's expectations. "Ethan, darling," she'd say in that voice that sounded like honey, but stung like whiskey. "You could do your little furniture hobby on weekends. Lots of successful executives have artistic hobbies. Look at your father's friend, Mr. Langford. He paints watercolors, but he still runs a billion-dollar investment firm. The monthly dinners at the country club were exercises in endurance. Malcolm would hold court at our regular table, the one with the view of the 18th hole, and he'd introduce me to his business associates with barely concealed disappointment. This is my eldest Ethan. He's in the furniture business. The pause before furniture always hung in the air like a bad smell. Then he'd quickly pivot to Grant's latest triumph or Vanessa's newest high-profile case, his voice brightening like someone had finally turned the lights on. 4 years ago, Malcolm offered me a position in his company as vice president of development. It came with a 7-figure salary, a company car stock options, and the clear understanding that I'd be groomed to take over part of his empire. I turned it down on a Tuesday afternoon in his office, watching his face cycle through disbelief rage and finally a cold dismissal that never quite thawed after that day. "You're choosing poverty," he said, his voice flat and matter-of-fact. "You're choosing to be nobody when you could be somebody." "I'm choosing to be myself," I replied, though even then, I didn't know how ironic those words would become. Uncle Martin, Malcolm's younger brother, was the only one who understood. He was a professor of philosophy at Rio Grande University, which Malcolm considered another waste of the Whitaker genes. "Ethan, you know what your father's problem is?" Martin told me once after a particularly tense family dinner. He can't conceive of success that doesn't come with a dollar sign attached. But you and I know better. We know that meaning isn't measured in square footage or stock portfolios. The morning of Malcolm's 72nd birthday party, I felt optimistic for the first time in years. I'd spent 4 months restoring a piece that mattered something I thought might finally bridge the gap between us. It was a 1920s mahogany desk that had belonged to Malcolm's father, my grandfather, though now I know that was just another lie in the tapestry of fiction that was my life as Ethan Whitaker. The party was held at Malcolm's estate in Taos, a massive mountain lodge that looked like something architectural magazines feature when they want to show how the ultra-wealthy interpret rustic charm. 18,000 square feet of imported stone and reclaimed timber with windows that turned the New Mexico mountains into living paintings. 180 guests had gathered to celebrate Malcolm Whitaker's 72nd birthday, and the parking area looked like a luxury car showroom. I parked my beaten Chevy pickup between a Bentley and a Tesla, the mahogany desk wrapped in moving blankets in the truck bed. I arrived early specifically to set up the desk in his study as a surprise. The house staff knew me well enough to let me in through the service entrance without questions. They'd watched this family's dysfunction long enough to stay out of our drama. I spent an hour positioning the desk exactly where his old one sat, adjusting the leather inlay to catch the light from the window just right. This desk had taken me 4 months to restore, finding period-appropriate hardware, matching the original wood stain through dozens of attempts replacing the leather with identical grain patterns. It was possibly my best work. The party started at 600, and by 7, Malcolm was in his element. He stood in the center of the main hall, a glass of 25-year-old scotch in his hand, surrounded by admirers and business associates who laughed at his jokes like their contracts depended on it. Grant worked the room's east side, discussing cryptocurrency and market volatility with a group of investors. Vanessa held court near the fireplace, charming a state senator who was clearly interested in more than her legal opinions. I kept to the edges of the party, finding comfort in conversation with Uncle Martin, who looked as out of place as I felt despite his expensive suit. "You clean up nice, Ethan," he said, clinking his beer against mine. We were the only two drinking beer at a party where the champagne cost more per bottle than most people's car payments. "The shop's been good." I told him, genuinely happy to share something positive. "I just landed a contract with the Rio Grande History Museum. They want me to restore an entire collection of Gold Rush-era furniture." Martin's eyes lit up. "That's fantastic. Real cultural preservation work. You should be proud." That's when Malcolm's voice boomed across the room, cutting through every conversation like a blade. "Ethan, come here, son. Tell everyone about your little hobby shop." The condescension in his voice was thick enough to choke on. Every head in the room turned toward me. I saw phones already coming out the socialites, sensing drama the way sharks smell blood in the water. My cousin Tyler had his phone up and recording before I'd even taken my first step toward Malcolm. Brooke positioned herself for a better angle. Even Mr. Langford, Malcolm's closest business partner, had his phone discreetly raised. The crowd parted as I walked through their faces, showing that mixture of sympathy and anticipation that people wear when they're about to witness a car crash. Malcolm stood in the center of his admirers like a king holding court, his gray eyes locked on mine with an expression I'd seen before. It was the same look he wore when he was about to destroy a business competitor. "Actually, Dad, I wanted to show you something." I started trying to keep my voice steady and redirect the conversation. "I have a gift in your study that I think you'll appreciate." "A gift?" Malcolm laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. The scotch had loosened his usual control, but his cruelty was laser-focused. "What could you possibly give me that I couldn't buy myself 10 times over?" Another dusty chair, a refinished table, perhaps a quaint little bookshelf. The crowd chuckled uncomfortably. Some looked away, but most kept watching. This was better entertainment than anything Malcolm's money had provided so far. "You know what your real gift to me could be?" Malcolm continued, his voice rising with each word, finally acting like a Whitaker. Finally showing some ambition instead of playing with sawdust like a child. Do you have any idea what people say about you, about me? Malcolm Whitaker's son, the carpenter, like you're some kind of biblical character instead of a businessman. I'm not playing dad. I run a legitimate business that preserves historical artifacts. I have employees, contracts, a reputation built on quality work. A business. Malcolm's face turned an alarming shade of red. You call that a business? You make less in a year than Grant makes in a month. You make less than Vanessa bills in a week. You're 36 years old, unmarried, no children, living in a converted loft above a workshop that smells like turpentine and failure. Malcolm, please. My mother Diane tried to intervene, reaching for his arm, but he yanked it away from her touch. No, Diane, I'm done pretending, done hoping he'll change, done lying to our friends that Ethan is just finding himself. He turned back to me, his eyes cold as winter granite. You want to know what I really think? The slap came without warning. I drove through the New Mexico night with my face still burning from Malcolm's slap. The mountain roads blurring through tears I refused to let fall. The mahogany desk remained in my truck bed wrapped in blankets like a corpse, a monument to my foolish belief that craftsmanship could ever matter to a man who measured everything in dollar signs and market dominance. The 3-hour drive from Taos to Albuquerque felt like crossing between worlds, from Malcolm's kingdom of crystal and marble to my realm of sawdust and honest work. My phone vibrated constantly on the passenger seat, the screen lighting up with notifications I didn't want to see. The videos were already viral. Tyler had titled his live stream Family Fortune Fumble Billionaire Breaks Bad at Birthday. By the time I reached Albuquerque, there were 19 missed calls from reporters, 47 text messages from people I hadn't spoken to since college, and one voicemail from Grant saying simply, Jesus. Ethan. I'm sorry. He went too far. My apartment above the workshop had never felt more like a sanctuary. I climbed the exterior stairs slowly, each step an effort against the weight of 36 years of inadequacy that Malcolm had just validated in front of everyone who mattered in his world. The familiar smell of wood stain and linseed oil greeted me as I opened the door, and for a moment I just stood there breathing it in, letting it remind me who I was when I wasn't trying to be Malcolm Whitaker's son. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the phones pointed at me, heard the nervous laughter of the crowd, felt the sting of Malcolm's palm against my cheek. At 2:30 in the morning, I gave up and went down to the workshop. A half-finished rocking chair sat on my workbench, its curves waiting for the final sanding that would bring out the cherry wood's natural flame pattern. I ran my hands over it, feeling the grain, the spots that still needed attention, the potential waiting to be revealed. That's when the anger finally came. Not the hot, explosive rage that Malcolm wielded like a weapon, but something colder, more focused. I was done. Done trying to earn approval from a man who saw my life's work as an embarrassment. Done defending choices that needed no defense. Done being a Whitaker, if being a Whitaker meant crushing everything gentle and creative and meaningful in the pursuit of wealth. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and started writing. If Malcolm wanted to cut me from his will, fine. I'd build something without his money, without his name, without his shadow looming over every decision. I wrote out a business plan that I'd been too afraid to pursue. Expansion into Santa Fe and Seattle partnerships with museums across the Southwest apprenticeship program for young craftspeople who deserved better than to be told their gifts were worthless. The loan applications would be brutal without the Whitaker name as collateral, but I had enough saved for a start. My credit was good. My reputation in the restoration community was solid. I could move somewhere where Malcolm Whitaker was just another rich man, not the sun around which everyone orbited. At 7:00 in the morning, Mrs. Lillian Mercer called. I almost didn't answer, but something in the persistence of her ring made me pick up. Ethan, dear. Her voice was warm but urgent. I saw what happened. That horrible man. Are you all right? I will be, I told her. And for the first time since the slap, I actually believed it. I'm thinking about leaving Albuquerque, starting fresh somewhere else. Before you do anything drastic, she said. And there was something strange in her voice, a weight that hadn't been there in our previous conversations. There's something I should tell you. I've known your family for 45 years, Ethan. I knew Malcolm when he was building his first apartment complex, and I knew Diane when she was desperate for a child after her third miscarriage. My hand tightened on the phone. Mrs. Lillian Mercer. What are you talking about? There are things about your father, about you, about how you came to be their son that never quite added up. The timeline. Ethan. You appeared in their lives when you were supposedly 2 years old, but there are no pictures of you before that. No birth announcement, no hospital records at Midtown Medical Center where Diane claims you were born. That doesn't mean anything. Maybe they lost the photos. Maybe the records were misplaced. Maybe she said, softly, or maybe the reason you could never be the son Malcolm wanted is because you were never meant to be his son at all. Promise me you'll be home this morning around 8:30. Trust me, Ethan. I've been waiting 35 years to right a terrible wrong, and I think the universe finally gave me the opening I needed. The knock came at exactly 8:30 in the morning. 3 measured raps that echoed through my apartment with an authority that made my coffee cup halt halfway to my lips. I set it down carefully, walked to the door, and opened it to find 3 people who looked like they'd stepped out of a corporate law firm's recruitment poster. The woman in front stood tall and composed, her silver-streaked black hair pulled into a perfect chignon, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my truck. The 2 men flanking her looked equally professional, one older with kind brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, one younger holding a leather briefcase like it contained nuclear codes. Ethan Whitaker, the woman asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Yes, my name is Sandra Whitman. I'm a senior partner at Whitman, Donovan & Cho, LLP. These are my colleagues, Mr. Peter Donovan and Mr. Eric Cho. We represent your biological father. May we come in? The words hit me like ice water. My biological father. There's some mistake. Malcolm Whitaker is my father. I have a birth certificate, social security records, a whole life that says Malcolm Whitaker is my father. Mr. Whitaker. Sandra said, her voice gentle but firm. We represent Victor Carlisle. He's been searching for his kidnapped son for 35 years. His son was taken from Green Lake Park in Seattle when he was 7 months old. That son's name was Jacob Carlisle. 3 months ago, a DNA match from a genealogy website confirmed what Victor has suspected for years. You are Jacob Carlisle. My legs felt disconnected from my body. This is insane. You're telling me I was kidnapped, that Malcolm and Diane kidnapped me. May we come in? Sandra repeated. This conversation shouldn't happen in a hallway, and what we have to show you will require you to sit down. I stepped aside, numbly watching as they entered with practiced efficiency. Eric immediately set his briefcase on my coffee table and began extracting documents. Peter moved to the window, positioning himself like this was some kind of security operation. Sandra sat across from me, her posture perfect, her eyes sympathetic but determined. Your biological father, Victor Carlisle, wanted us to approach you carefully, she began, especially after what happened last night at Malcolm Whitaker's party. Yes, we saw the videos. Victor has been monitoring your life for 3 months ever since the DNA match came through. He needed to be absolutely certain before destroying the life you've known. Eric opened a manila folder and pulled out a photograph, sliding it across the coffee table toward me. This was taken 6 weeks before you were kidnapped. The photo showed a young couple in a park. The man tall with dark hair and green eyes that looked exactly like mine holding a baby, while a woman with my nose and my jawline laughed at something outside the frame. But it was the baby that made my breath catch. Around his tiny wrist was a silver bracelet with an engraved train engine. I looked down at my own wrist where the same bracelet had sat for 35 years. Malcolm had told me it was a Whitaker family heirloom passed down from his father. I'd worn it every day. This piece of my heritage, this connection to my grandfather. "That's not possible," I whispered. But even as I said it, pieces were sliding into place. Why there were no photos of me before age 2? Why I looked nothing like Malcolm's sharp features or Diane's delicate bone structure? Why extended family members sometimes did double takes when they saw me? Why Uncle Martin always looked at me with that strange expression like he was seeing a ghost? Eric pulled out another document. This is the police report from July 10th, 1990. Jacob Carlisle, 7 months old, was taken from his stroller while his nanny was distracted by a woman asking for directions. The nanny, Rosa Delgado, gave a description of the woman that, when age progressed, bears a remarkable resemblance to Diane Whitaker. "The nanny died 15 years ago," Peter added quietly. "But she left a confession with her priest. She was paid $60,000 to look away for 5 minutes. She thought the baby was going to a loving family who couldn't have children. She didn't know it was a kidnapping until she saw the news coverage, and by then she was too terrified to come forward." Sandra leaned forward. "Victor Carlisle isn't just any man searching for his lost son, Mr. Whitaker. He's the founder and CEO of Carlisle Dynamics Aerospace Renewable Energy Technology Patents. His company builds the navigation systems for half the commercial airlines in the world." Eric pulled out one final document. "This is Victor's. Will update it every year for 35 years, always maintaining a place for Jacob. You're the sole heir to an estate worth approximately $3.1 billion. The room spun. I felt my knees hit the floor. The weight of 35 years of lies crushing down on me. That conversation happened 3 months ago, and every day since has been like learning to walk again in a world where the ground keeps shifting. The DNA tests confirmed everything with 99.8% certainty. I was Jacob Victor Carlisle, stolen from Green Lake Park on a sunny Tuesday morning while my nanny Rosa Delgado was paid to look the other way. The woman who distracted her, asking for directions to a hospital that didn't exist, was Diane Whitaker, wearing a wig and sunglasses, desperate for a child after 3 miscarriages, had broken something fundamental inside her. Malcolm and Diane were arrested 3 weeks after the lawyers knocked on my door. The FBI had been building a case quietly once Victor provided them with the DNA evidence. The arrest happened at their Sandia Hills Country Club right in the middle of their Tuesday golf game with the same audience of elite socialites who'd watched Malcolm slap me at his birthday party. This time, Tyler didn't get to live stream it, but the news crews captured every second of Malcolm being led away in handcuffs. His face purple with rage, shouting about his lawyers and his connections and how this was all a mistake. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged adoption papers claiming I was adopted from a defunct agency in Mexico. Bribes to courthouse clerks to backdate records. A paper trail of deception that Malcolm had maintained with the same meticulous attention he gave his real estate deals. Diane broke down during her first interrogation, confessing everything. How she'd found the adoption ring through a desperate late-night internet search. How she'd convinced Malcolm that this was their only chance. How she'd lived every day for 35 years, terrified that someone would notice I had Victor's eyes. Evelyn's knows neither of their blood. Grant and Vanessa discovered their entire inheritance was being seized as proceeds of crime. The irony was perfect and terrible. Malcolm had disinherited me from money that was never his to give from a fortune built partially on the foundation of raising a stolen child. Grant called me once drunk and crying, saying he was sorry for every time he'd rubbed his success in my face. Vanessa sent a letter through her lawyer, formal and cold, saying she hoped I found peace with my real family. But the strangest part wasn't gaining billions or losing the only parents I'd ever known. It was meeting Victor for the first time. After the lawyer showed me the evidence, I walked downstairs to find him standing beside a black sedan. This tall, silver-haired man who looked like me aged 35 years into the future. He didn't try to hug me. He just stood there with tears streaming down his face and said, "You still wear the bracelet. I have the matching one. I've worn it every day since you disappeared." We went for coffee at a small shop near my workshop, and he told me about Evelyn, my biological mother who died 5 years ago from cancer, never giving up hope that I was alive somewhere. "She decorated your nursery with trains," he said, his voice breaking. "You loved them. You'd make this little whistle sound when you saw one. She kept that nursery exactly the same for 30 years until the cancer got too bad and we had to sell that house to pay for treatments." Victor, it turned out, had built his empire the same way I restored furniture piece by piece with patience and precision and an obsession with quality. "You can't change what you are, son," he told me over our third cup of coffee. "Even 35 years of lies couldn't erase your true nature. The way you restore things, that's exactly how I built Carlisle Dynamics, taking broken companies and making them whole again." Mrs. Lillian Mercer visited last week and finally told me the truth. She'd been Evelyn's best friend in college, my godmother who'd been at the hospital when I was born. She'd moved to Albuquerque 20 years ago for her husband's work, and when she met me at an estate sale, she nearly fainted. "You looked so much like Evelyn, it took my breath away." I've been investigating ever since pushing Victor to try the DNA databases, waiting for the right moment to bring the truth to light. I kept my workshop, but moved it to Seattle to a bigger space near Victor's headquarters. He offered to buy me an entire building, but I refused. "This is mine," I told him. "Built with my own hands, even if they're Carlisle hands, not Whitaker ones." The rocking chair I was building that night, the one I touched while planning my escape from Malcolm's shadow, now sits in Victor's living room. He rocks in it every evening, looking at photos of Evelyn telling me stories about the 7 months they had with me before I was taken. Next to it sits the mahogany desk I'd restored for Malcolm. Victor bought it at the estate auction for 12 times its value just to keep it in the family. He said, even if it came from the wrong one. If this story touched you, if it made you think about the mysteries that might hide in your own family history, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below about your own family surprises or moments when you discovered who you really were. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that remind us that sometimes the life we're meant to live is just waiting for us to discover.